Hello and welcome to STEM with Mr. N, where I perform different demonstrations and explain the science behind what we're seeing. This week I'm going to explore the layers of the ocean. Let's check it out. When scientists first started exploring the oceans, they split up sections of the ocean into different zones. They called these the trench, the abyss, the midnight, the twilight and the sunlight zones. Now each of these zones have their own unique characteristics and also their own unique characters that live there. By using the density of different liquids, I'm going to create the layers of the ocean in a jar. For this activity you will need some oil, some blue dish soap, blue food colouring, some warm water, some corn syrup and some rubbing alcohol, or in this case I am using vodka, as well as an empty glass jar and something to be able to measure out your cups with. To start with, I'm going to make the trench zone by measuring out 1/3 of a cup of corn syrup and then adding a lot of blue food colouring. Because the trench zone is the deepest zone in the ocean, it is very dark, and that is why I am adding lots of blue food colouring. The trench zone starts around 20,000 feet below sea level and goes to the bottom of the deepest parts of the ocean. The deepest trench zone is off the coast of Japan, measuring 35,797 feet. The temperature is just above freezing and the pressure is equal to 48 Boeing 747 jets. Invertebrates like starfish and worms call this zone home. Next I'm going to create the abyss zone by measuring out 1/3 of a cup of the blue dish soap and then pouring this into the jar. The abyss extends from around 13,000 feet down to 19,600 feet and it sits on top of the trench zone, just like my dish soap is starting to do with the corn syrup. There is no light at all and the water temperature is near freezing. Squids can be found in this layer, but there is very little life here. 3/4 of the ocean floor lies within this zone. And now I'm going to create the midnight zone by mixing some warm water with a little bit of blue food colouring so it's a bit lighter than the zones below it. I'm then going to very slowly pour the warm water into the jar and I'm using the lid of the jar to help slow down the speed. And I need to do it slowly so the warm water does not immediately mix with the dish soap. The midnight zone extends from around 3,200 feet down to 13,000 feet and it has a surprising amount of creatures swimming around. The animals themselves would produce any of the light seen in this zone. Sperm whales can dive down to this level to search for their food. On top of the midnight zone is the twilight zone, which I am going to make by measuring out 1/3 of a cup of vegetable oil. Now food colouring doesn't mix very well with vegetable oil, so this is just going in as the colour that it is. The twilight zone is the second layer of the ocean and it extends from around 650 feet down to 3,200 feet. Sometimes it's called the midwater zone. The light that breaks through at the twilight zone is usually faint. Bioluminescent creatures live in the twilight zone as well as other unusual looking fish. Finally, I'm going to create the sunlight zone by measuring out 1/3 of a cup of vodka and again very carefully pouring this into the jar using the lid to help me. Life and light are everywhere in the sunlight zone and this extends from the sea's surface down to about 650 feet. With the light comes heat, so there's a large range of temperatures in this zone. Something unexpected happened there when I was putting this together. You see, alcohol would normally float on top of oil, but the vodka has sunk beneath the oil and is floating on top of the water. This has created a sort of turquoisey layer underneath the oil, with the oil being the top layer. So now instead of my oil representing the twilight zone, it is going to represent the sunlight zone, and then that turquoisey bit underneath where the vodka is sitting is going to represent that twilight zone. Now it might be difficult from this angle to see all of the 5 zones, but if I shine a light behind the jar, hopefully you can clearly see the change in colour as it moves down the different zones, from the sunlight zone at the top with the oil, followed by the twilight zone, the midnight zone, the abyss and then the trench. Now I'd mentioned when talking about the trench layer that the pressure down there would be equal to the weight of 48 Boeing 747s. That is because as you go further down in the water, you have the pressure of all the water up above you pushing down. There's a very simple way to demonstrate the effect of pressure on an item, and we can do that using a plastic syringe and a mini marshmallow. So I'm going to pull the plunger completely out the top of the syringe. I'm going to drop in a mini marshmallow and try and have it standing upright, and then I'm going to put the plunger back in the top of the syringe. By pinning my thumb at the bottom, closing off the syringe as I hold it at the top, I am now stopping any movement of air leaving this syringe. As I push down on the plunger, I am increasing the air pressure on top of that marshmallow. And you can see as I keep pushing the plunger further and further down, that marshmallow is getting squashed under the pressure of the air pushing down on top of it. Now, although this demonstration is using air pressure, it still shows the same effects that you would get as you go further and further down in the ocean, with the pressure of the water on top being a crushing force. That is why submarines, submersibles and anything else humans designed to go down deep in the ocean need to be designed to be able to withstand these extreme pressures. To be able to create the layers of the ocean and have all the liquids sitting one on top of the other relied on the density of the liquids. Now, I didn't really say anything about density because that was not the focus of this video, and I have made a video on density previously, so I'll put a link in the description for you to check that out. Similarly, the experiment with the mini marshmallow used air pressure, and I've done a couple of videos previously on air pressure where I talk about it in more detail and show you other activities, so again I'll put links in the description for you to check those out. Well, that's all for this week. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please hit the like and subscribe buttons to stay up to date on all future content. As always, I would like to take this opportunity to answer any science questions you have about any science topics at all. So feel free to email me at stemwithmrn@outlook.com and I'll get back to you with answers to your questions. You can subscribe to the channel by pushing the button here, and I've added links here to the other STEM demos and explanation videos I've done, here to my STEM career interviews, and here to my Things You Should Know series. This has been STEM with Mr. N, exploring the layers of the ocean.